Hola, amigas y amigos. Welcome to the MíraLA Podcast. I'm your host, Arianna Lemus. This podcast is by women, for women, and anyone willing to listen to women. Enjoy the show. Isabel Grace is a woman-owned florist business. Aside from making beautiful bouquets for every occasion, she and her team plan events to help you celebrate all of your family celebrations and milestones. From baby showers, birthdays, graduations, and weddings, Isabel Grace is a proud sponsor of the MíraLA Podcast, providing all of our guests their favorite arrangement of flowers. In this episode, I interview Erika Snyder. Erika Snyder is a 23-year-old PhD student. Growing up in the 818, she has always loved science, from running around in the hills to collecting plants and bugs. When her father passed away at the age of 17, she began working to support her single mother. While loss had marked her life and her family life, it instilled a deep grittiness and tenacity to overcome. She has studied neurophysiology to better understand human diseases, and today she actually works in a lab focusing on immunology. Thanks for tuning in to the MíraLA Podcast. Today I'm speaking with 23-year-old Erika Snyder. She is a scientist, and I am so excited to be talking to you today.
Yes, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Today's production day was a lot of talk about spirituality. Mm-hmm. And even though science and spirituality are not something that people put together, I know that you personally have incorporated both into your life.
Yes, absolutely. That is something that has guided me through my life. Even before I really had the words for it, I think to summarize it, before I can get into the specific details, it's honestly just an appreciation and kind of an awe for the way the universe works. And I think science allows us to do that in a really unique way. Like we talk about like macroscopic versus microscopic, right? And like big picture versus small picture. So I think most people can appreciate the feeling of looking up at the sky and being like, wow, I am so small compared to the big picture. Whereas I think my unique appreciation comes from the fact that I am able to study like the specific proteins that dictate a cell's behavior, a single cell that's part of like millions within the human body, for example. And I think even that, so it's like infinity goes both ways almost, but I'm working on getting farther and farther into the microscopic kind of world.
Well, she's a scientist. Absolutely, 100%. That's incredible. So the work that you're doing now in your lab, can you just kind of share with me what's that day-to-day life like?
So should I get into a little bit like what it is or just like the daily experience?
I think the more information, the better.
Let's try to do both. Yeah. So I'll start by saying that I'm in an immunology lab. So we study the immune system, cells that comprise like human immune systems. In particular, I study one cell type. There are hundreds of types of different cells, just like there are different types of tissues in your body that are made up of different types of cells. I study one very specific type called macrophages. And I love saying this to like students I've had in the past. We call them, so they can remember, monster macrophages.
That's cute.
These are the ones that can actually engulf other cells whole. So they will literally, you'll see them on the microscope, like swallow it whole and then start to dissolve it inside. And the purpose of that is being able to eliminate pathogens, cancerous cells. That's their entire job, is eliminating these from the body. And so the focus of my research is what we call them molecular mechanisms, like within the cell, what things are dictating what makes a macrophage decide to eat a cancer cell versus leave a cell that it shouldn't be eating that's healthy alone. And so that's a lot of our focus, is like, how can we make them eat more cancer in cases where someone has cancer and their immune system isn't taking care of it? Or if someone has an immune condition, like arthritis is actually because of an overactive immune system and it's attacking your body. And so how can we turn it off? It's basically, how can we control it?
How I understood Pac-Man.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
a great analogy.
right?
Yeah, that's what you should picture. That's what your macrophages do. They identify it as the opponent with very specific signals. And that tells it, okay, this signal I just recognized means it's a cancer cell versus this signal I just recognized means that this is a cell I need to protect and should leave alone. Sometimes we'll even see them spit it back out if they recognize that, oh, this was a bodily cell. I shouldn't have eaten that. So absolutely Pac-Man. Yeah. But you asked about my daily experience. And so everything I just said sounds like super fantastic and like amazing and big. But the day-to-day experience is the nitty-gritty. And so what that actually looks like, I go in there every day and I do individual experiments, right? And so for example, when I do these things to figure this out, it takes years because I'm testing one tiny thing at a time. For example, I talked about the signal it would recognize to go eat a cancer cell. I could be spending 2 months on an experiment figuring out exactly what concentration of that signal causes that response, right? So it's like all these very specific pieces of knowledge that we need to have to figure out how we can translate this into like immunotherapies. So this is, I'm the person that is doing the work before it even gets to clinical trials.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the work that you're doing sounds really frustrating.
It can be extremely frustrating. I mean, science, I think I was mentioning this earlier, is just one of those jobs that is filled with constant rejection. And so you have to get that motivation from somewhere else because you're not going to get it. It's not, I would say it's incredibly satisfying, but the process is not so much satisfying. Something else has to drive you because, to get your funding to continue your experiments, like you were writing grant after grant after grant to like the National Institute of Health, the NHS, like all these different groups, telling them why your research is important. And of course, everyone thinks their research is the most important.
Sure.
But, you'll do that and you'll get rejections. And even doing those experiments, like I was saying earlier, it takes 10 times to even get a successful result. And then you're on to the next one, starting back over at square one. So frustrating, but yeah, if you love it, it doesn't feel so frustrating because it kind of feels more like a puzzle, I think, than anything. And
it's also a journey, right? Like
Yes.
everyone is on their own journey.
Yes.
And this is the path that you have chosen. So choosing a specific path, it comes with certain challenges.
Oh, yeah.
So the why of becoming a scientist, a woman in STEM, what is that experience doing for you as a young woman, like being educated about that, and also the why behind it?
Yes. What it does for me, I think it's definitely, it fills me with a sense of purpose. I think like you were saying, this is the path. I think most people seek to choose a path that fills them with purpose. They're doing something they feel like it matters. So for me, I feel like, yes, I love it. Yes, it's the thrill of the puzzle. But also I know, like I was saying earlier, that these things are pivotal to creating the medicines that help people survive cancer, survive, severe immune like reactions and disorders. So it's kind of just, even though I'm on like the bottom tier of that pyramid, I know that that's the foundation. So I think that also keeps me going. That's what I think it does a lot for me. And the why, I think that is kind of who I've always been. I have always been the why kid. I know I annoyed my mom endlessly as a child. Why? But why? And that's just kind of who I am. And that's who I've always been. And especially in the context of biology, I was that kid digging in the mud, collecting my specimens, studying things that I found outside. I didn't want to go to, the mall or like, I don't know, like typical things that maybe another little girl might be into, which is fine. But I was at the Southwestern Herpetology Society meetings. That's like study of reptiles. So I was going with...
You were that little girl.
Yeah, I was with field biologists. doing basically checks of local sites to document local species and population sizes. And I was at the Natural History Museum listening to entomology talks. That's bugs. One of my childhood heroes, his name was Brent the Bug Guy. He was my icon. I mean, this guy like had every bug. He knew everything about every single bug. And I just loved that. I loved, and you know what I think I honestly admired about him is like seeing the effect he had on other people.
Sure.
And so, you know, when we talk about science communication and especially like how important that is, not only was I excited and like I thought about the way he made me feel, but I'm like, look at this room full of people enamored with the information that he's giving them. And I just like, I wanted something about that really deeply. I wanted to be able to not only do it myself, but to give that to people.
That's amazing. I think when I was growing up as a little girl, watching Disney Channel, wanting to be an actress, wanting to be on TV. And it's so cool to hear your experience and it's so unique to you, right? But also growing up wanting to be in science, did you kind of feel that it was male dominated at like an early age, or did you know that like going into this, you were going to have experiences that made you feel less than, because predominantly the classes that you're in are with men? Like, what has that journey been like?
You know, I think so growing up very uniquely, I think I was protected from that because of my parents. I was extremely lucky to have a mother that told me that I was made for this. You know, I was built for this. Anything I wanted, I could have. And that's a very unique experience growing up, especially as like a girl, having that experience with her mother and her telling, you know, never ever placing a limitation or a hesitation around the idea that I was going to be a scientist or a doctor or anything around that I wanted to do. That didn't really hit me until I got to college, like upper division classes, as I was in like calculus, physics classes, like those that are typically very male dominated. And it kind of, I realized it. I'm like, wow, yeah, this is a thing. I know people talk about this all day, but then I felt it. And then, of course, there were times, you know, I was discounted, just as I think that's like, it almost doesn't have to be said as a girl. There are always going to be times, like if you are in a class with a bunch of guys, odds are they're all going to think they're smarter than you. They're going to think they're better than you and that they deserve to be there more than you. And so I felt that, but I think that was kind of driving for me, honestly. I'm a pretty competitive person. I mean, my younger brother who you saw here, we grew up in competition. I like to think healthy competition, but that's just kind of how we were, you know? And so we both played sports. I think that contributes too. So it honestly just kind of lit a fire under my ass, honestly. Like
I love that.
It just made me want to be better.
That's so badass. You're such a baddie.
Oh,
seriously. You're a smart baddie. And like, I love that for you and like all the opportunities that you're going to get. I know you also just had an article published. That's really exciting. Why don't we talk about that?
Okay. Yeah. So that one was amazing. I'd love to, well, first I'd like to start by saying, so I was an author on this paper, but like in the world of research, the biggest creds is like first author. So like there's always many authors, but it's always the name et al., you know, like when you cite a publication.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I am in the authorship because I did contribute to this publication, but I have to give a shout out to my very first mentor at UCSB. She's a fourth year candidate. Her name is Annalise Bond, and she has taught me everything that I know in this lab, how everything works, how to do experiments, how to think about immunology, everything she's taught me. And I basically jumped in for a rotation while she was halfway done with this project. And she brought me up to speed on the project. She was looking at a very specific effect. In summary, she had found that when these macrophages, the little Pac-Mans, when they were exposed to a cancer cell once, so they recognized its signal on the surface, if we took it away from the cancer cells and then later showed it more cancer cells, the amount that it was eating and swallowing was really enhanced. So it almost had this like working memory. Like these cells had, we call it FCR engagements. That's a fancy word for it has a little receptor that recognizes the signal. We found that if that had been engaged once, for up to 5 days later, those cells remembered and they would eat more and more cancer. And so that's a very exciting idea because theoretically, right, in the context of an immunotherapy, this is something that they do in other contexts, but a patient with cancer, we extract their macrophages from their blood, spin them down, isolate them, expose them to cancer outside the body, take that cancer away, put them back. They remember, and they're going to go hungry for that cancer within the body. Wow. So that was an amazing finding. But what we didn't know, there was like more follow-up experiments that had to be done. We didn't know like, okay, is this like, can we repeat this in a purely like physiological system, basically like without any of our bioengineering stuff that we were doing there? Does this still work? So like, could we take a normal macrophage and expose it to a normal cancer cell, and will it still remember? Those were my experiments that I did. And in fact, it did. And so the principle held true.
Was that your hypothesis?
That was my hypothesis. Hypothesis was not null. That's my statisticians will understand that. But anyways, so that was what I was able to contribute to. That was during my rotation. And then that work had just got published in Developmental Cell this August, which is a journal that publishes on cell biology.
Oh my God. Amazing.
Yes.
You're doing amazing work.
Thank you.
And like, you're so articulate. You're so intelligent. And like, even how you speak about the work that you do, there's so much passion behind it. And I truly believe you're going to go so far.
Thank you.
Because as women, when you have the intelligence behind what you're saying and the passion and exterior beauty, you captivate an audience, and all they can do is just listen to you, and my whole thing right now is helping women recognize that power within. Absolutely. And I'm so happy to give you this platform because I think other women who listen to this can be so enamored, with the way you speak about your work. Because maybe there are girls in STEM who shy away from talking about this. Absolutely. Or maybe they already feel that intimidation factor that they're going to be judged. So like, how do you deal with all of that? I hate to use a cliche, but there is a lot of faking it. Because, and that's something. So actually, before I did immunology, I was in a neuroscience lab and I learned a lot there as well that I think translated into how I understand myself and how I understand other people. So I'm sure you've heard this thing. If you're feeling sad and you smile, even if you're like crying while you're smiling, using those facial muscles sends a signal, very specific set of signals to your brain that I'm smiling. I must be feeling all right. And then you start to, because there's a hormonal change that follows the physical action. So even if I wasn't feeling very confident, which is, I am feeling confident because I've had to take the time to develop that. Even if I wasn't sitting, simply sitting here and acting like I am is telling my brain that I'm okay. I'm doing all right. And so I think that's a huge part of it. Even when you're not feeling positive, even when you're not feeling confident, I mean, that's something every single day. Like I said, it's this whole thing of science is constantly having to justify yourself and justify your findings and your research and your purpose. Even when you don't feel it, you just have to, you just do, because the bigger picture and you know who you are and you know that this is what you want to be doing. So there's honestly not much else of a choice. You just do. When you know something is meant for you, you just have to. And you have to do it unashamed and unafraid. No, that's great. And I think that's really great advice that all people can apply to. It's not just in, working in a science lab, but I think all women just not fake it, but fake it until you start feeling that way. Absolutely. And it's just like mentally you have to tell yourself that it's not how I feel right now. But even with this podcast too, I have days where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done a podcast before, but I have to just tell myself I know what it takes to be here. I know what it takes to be an interviewer. I have many years competing in pageantry and there were so many times where I was faking it, but that helped me get to the next level. So talk to me about the the levels in your life that you've had to develop, right? You've gone through a lot of adversity and you've had to have this like forward thinking, brave thinking mentality. I think more so just giving advice to young girls that maybe are suffering some adversity that they're experiencing. Like what have you used in your journey to help you be more of like a positive thinker overall?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think turning to who you can. And again, back on the topic, like even when you're afraid to admit like how you're feeling, tell it to someone, because like you just said, odds are they're feeling it too. If you can find another girl to talk to, you know, anyone, I think it's it's invaluable. And I think that's something that I love talking about, is the importance of specifically female mentorship in STEM as a female scientist. That is something that has been so invaluable to me.
Everything is created twice, once in the mind and once in the material world. I'm a certified dream builder. I made it my mission to share the beautiful work that Mary Morrissey did with the Brave Thinking Institute. I believe in sharing that knowledge will heal our world one dream at a time.
The most important thing in this world is imagination. It's so important to be connected to your vision. That vision is key to get new results.
I'm going to be 77. What I got out of Saturday was an opportunity to identify who I am and what I need. And it was priceless. I still feel that there's lots to learn, lots to do.
Wow. Let's do it.
Yes.
I'm really excited about hearing about your dreams and seeing you transform.
All of my mentors, my role models in science, I've been, again, extremely lucky, have been women. My very first lab, like I guess it's called a principal investigator. Usually they have a postdoctoral degree, all this, they run the lab. Dr. Catherine Wilkinson at San Jose State University. Our lab manager, Serena Ortiz, who's now also gone to pursue her PhD. My current PI, Dr. Megan Morrissey, and my first rotation mentor there, Annalise Bond. These are the people, these are the women that I have relied on so heavily. Every time I feel unsure of myself, every time I feel unsure of an experiment, if I know what's going on, like, what am I doing? Yeah. That's who I turn to. And because I know they felt it too. It's inevitable. They have felt it too. So I think that's been the biggest thing. Or even just my mom, she might not know about the science, but she knows what it feels like to maybe not feel, appreciated or respected just as a woman in an industry, that doesn't typically prioritize putting women on that pedestal.
100%.
So I think that's the biggest thing for me, turning to people, turning to other women.
Gorgeous words. I mean, it's so true. You have to have a support system. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of value in mentorship, especially when it's woman to woman. Yeah. So what can we expect from you as you go on your journey of becoming this amazing scientist? Yes. Do you plan to mentor other women in your lab, or how does that go?
Absolutely. And this is actually something I've been writing about. It's a kind of a, rite of passage of every upcoming PhD student. You apply for this thing called the NSF GRFP, which is like the National Science Foundation grant. And you have to write 3 pages of a personal statement, aside from your research, who you are, what you're going to do with this money, what time is it going to allow you? And this is my biggest goal, I think, outside of my project, is to take on my own students. So take on undergrad students, particularly from underrepresented backgrounds, and show them what I was shown, what I had the lucky opportunity to be shown. I'm actually going to do it. So there's something called the Mark Scholars Program, which is basically just a program funded by the NIH that specifically, it's amazing, specifically gives opportunities to underrepresented students. I would love if I got a girl. I think so. They ask you like, what type of student would you best identify with? And I think that's exactly what I'm going to say. I'm going to use words that probably describe my upbringing. You know, I didn't grow, I'm a first generation college student. I didn't have any connections in science going into college. And that makes it harder. It just does, unless you have that one person shining a light into your life and giving you the information and telling you the way. And I feel like because I was lucky enough to get that, it's almost my obligation, like to the universe, to the powers that may be, to pass that on. 100%. And it's just my duty to the field, because I want more people, more girls like myself there, you know? So I think that's absolutely a goal. And I'm taking that student this upcoming summer, they're coming to me.
That's exciting. Yeah. Well, I tell all my guests, because I definitely want to do like a recap, or like, absolutely, like in a year from now, have you back and, you know, talk about that experience. Cause I think there's power in words. And I think the more that we talk about the things that we want to do versus feeling like, you know, people are casting, you know, negative energy onto our dreams. And it's like, at the end of the day, my destiny is my destiny. No matter what people say or think about me is going to change that. Because whether it was a lesson or a mistake, at the end of the day, it helped me grow into the woman that I am today. And I'm very thankful for this platform that I've started, you know, because it's allowed me to like meet other intelligent, beautiful women like yourself, and give you a voice and a platform to share your story, because we all have a story to share. And it's so important when you have been educated and you do come from a supportive background to not feel bad about that. Like there's nothing wrong with like having a supportive mother and sharing that and sharing your story. It almost like deems this like negative thing that we have. Like, God forbid someone's doing good in their life. Yeah, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So like to sit here in front of you, like I give you your flowers, you know. Definitely want to talk about sunflowers. Yes. Give our sponsor a shout out. Absolutely. Thank you. Why are sunflowers your favorite flower?
You're going to regret asking that. I'm just kidding. I mean, the long story short, I mean, I love them because they're beautiful. I mean, right. Like just on surface value, they're very welcoming and bright and gorgeous. And I love the way so they're a wild plant, right? Like I'm sure if you've ever seen wild sunflowers, like a field of wild sunflowers is just like a dream. Very beautiful. The reason I really like came to appreciate them, I remember, when I found this out, and I think I watched a time lapse. So sunflowers are one of those plants, many are, but that's strikingly adaptive to the light in its environment. Yeah. So I'm sure maybe some of you have seen like a time lapse of a sunflower, even in the course of one day, will turn its face 180 degrees to follow the sun to survive. And I just think that's an insane, gorgeous like survival mechanism that this plant has evolved. And I don't know if you could find an analogy in somewhere in there about growing where you're planted and adapting and being gorgeous while you do it.
100%. Absolutely. And like that's why I was so thankful to like get a sponsor that, you know, is promoting women-owned business. And I think there's something to be said about, as a woman, like buying yourself flowers, not always having to like expecting it from a partner, but like genuinely like giving yourself flowers, you know, whether that's through words or a physical act of service, but then also like the women that you come across, right? I think it's a beautiful gesture. And that's why it's a part of my brand, it's part of MíraLA, and, you know, just supporting other women. I know that the community that I'm building is not for everybody, you know what I mean? And that's okay. I have definitely become more comfortable being in my skin and knowing that the community that I'm building is for a specific group of people, a very unique, level-headed or like same mindset, right? So before we wrap up the show, how can we support you as a MíraLA community, support your research? Because now would be the time to share.
What a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that. And thank you for those. Oh, sorry. You know what? I would say the biggest thing you can do, just as, and not just for me, but is to look into these programs, like specifically MARC, specifically McNair Scholars. These are all programs that specifically look to support, like I said, underrepresented communities, first generation college students, and women in STEM, specifically women. So there's actually one specifically, I would say to everyone watching this, the WISE Fellowship is one to watch. You can donate to this. It's a publicly funded program, but it's women in science. That's
Very
what WISE.
cool. Brenda,
women. Yeah.
We'll add that to the show notes.
Women in Science and Engineering is the WISE Fellowship. So I think that's, even though it's not, necessarily me directly, that's something I would love for people to just, if you're going to put your $10 of donation somewhere, put it there.
Yeah. Your coffee money.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast episode today. It's been a wonderful educational conversation. I learned so much. But as you can see, it was like finding ways to understand. I was like, Pac-Man, you know what I mean? But yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. And I look forward to seeing your beautiful journey blossom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the MíraLA Podcast. If you are a woman and would like to be on the show, go to MíraLaPodcast.com. Follow us on socials at MíraLA Podcast. Use hashtag MíraLA Mondays. And if you want to support the show, subscribe, share with your amigos, and tune in for new episodes every Monday. Muchas gracias.